Then the other thing that's happening as the financial services sector is being decimated, the millionaires are also fleeing because why would you want to pay more tax? If you look at the share of millionaires, New York has lost 4%, whereas places like Florida have actually gone up by 2.8%. So there is a clear migration of businesses and also personal wealth. And this is why high taxing progressive policies actually hurt people overall because they take the jobs and the money with them.
That's right. So just to be clear, that extra 2% only applies to people earning over $1 million. And of course, all of Mamdani's comrades are going to say, see, they're rich. They've got enough money to be able to afford it. So yeah, but they don't have to stay. And so we are seeing, when I think it's for the first time, that graph that we saw from the Telegraph, for the first time, the number of millionaires in New York has actually gone down. For the first time, millionaires are actually fleeing the Big Apple rather than flocking to it, and that is all because of Mamdani taking over. Now, he plans to get about $4 to $5 billion out of this, out of that measure alone. Well, if he doesn't have as many millionaires to spend, suddenly he doesn't get to raise all that money. And then what does he have to do? He has to make cuts. Yeah. And then you have to cut the services for the poor people that you've made all these promises to. Yeah. And suddenly they don't have their state-run grocery stores anymore, even though it worked so well in the Soviet Union.
Exactly. And you know why it's not just the bankers and the financial companies and the rich people who are leaving. There's also been an exodus of police officers. Cops don't want to serve under Mamdani because of the comments that he's made in the past, talking about how he doesn't want a police force and making really degrading comments about officers, where he tried to walk back a bit during the campaign because he saw it was hurting him. But these officers don't want to work in a lawless society under a socialist like Mamdani. So I think this is going to be really damaging for New York.
And the last time, of course, that there were no cops or demoralised cops and no rich people and poverty-stricken in New York was, of course, in the 1970s and 80s, when they actually... It was so bad that they created the film Escape from New York because it resembled a giant concrete prison. So anyway, well done, socialism. I wish you all the best, though, mate. Go for your life. I'm sure it'll work out fine.
But apparently forget the
last 100 years ever happened. They all got it wrong, but you're going to get it right. I promise you. Anyway, now speaking of people who maybe get it right eventually. BBC bosses have quit sensationally after the UK public broadcaster was found to have misled its viewers by doctoring a quote from Donald Trump about the January 6 riots on the US Capitol building. Now, the actual Director General of the BBC, so basically the CEO, Tim Davie, said that he was quitting, that he was resigning in the middle of this huge scandal that involves their flagship Panorama program, which is like the ABC's Four Corners program. Tim Davie said that the decision to leave was entirely his decision, which anyone in TV knows means it was entirely not his decision. As well as another senior executive as well, News Chief Executive Deborah Turnus. She's resigned as well. And you will see what they actually did to Trump's speech, Trump's address, ahead of the January 6 Capitol riots in 2020 versus what Trump actually said. So first, let's take a look at what the BBC put to air in its, and again, flagship news and current affairs program, what is meant to be the gold standard of trustworthiness and reliability. Have a listen.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell. We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
And so not only Trump just did not say we're going to fight exactly after that bit, they got two completely different parts of the speech and spliced it together. But he also, in other parts of the speech, said it was going to be peaceful and patriotic. Now, again, I think Trump's election denialism was the worst thing he's ever done, and I didn't like what happened on January 6 one bit. But quite frankly, if you can't criticise what actually happened or deliver what actually happened as something that is not to be desirable in a democracy, and you're actually deliberately splicing it together. Firstly, how do you think that no one's going to notice? And secondly, what do you think is going to happen when they do? Well, the BBC has just found out its CEO and its head of news have just been voluntarily resigned.
But as they should. And it wasn't just on the Trump speech where they've been exposed as having systemic bias. I think this was really the nail in the coffin because it was so obvious and so egregious, but also their reporting of trans issues. They apparently had a special LGBTQ desk. So any story that touched those issues had to go past the gatekeepers of LGBTQ stories who all pushed the same pro-trans agenda on Israel and Hamas. They, of course, aired that documentary where they failed to disclose that the child narrating the documentary was actually the son of a Hamas official. So this wasn't just the only oopsies, right? It wasn't the only instance of this happening. It's systemic, it's broad-based, and I'm glad to see some justice, and people should know they cannot get away with this.
Absolutely, but they did for a long time. The BBC knew for 6 months about the doctoring of Trump's speeches. There were 2 speeches an hour apart that they spliced together. Yeah. Or perhaps one very long, rambling speech.
Knowing Trump, I suspect it was one 3-hour speech.
Probably. But regardless, it was obviously not right. And I just hope that this forced introspection that the BBC now has to do is replicated here in Australia with the ABC, because this is far from a problem just with the British public broadcaster. We very much have this problem here. And Boris Johnson, the former UK Prime Minister, wrote a column in the past couple of days saying he doesn't want to pay his licensing fees anymore for the BBC. They have to pay the equivalent of $350 a year to get the BBC over there.
That's the only way you get a television, isn't it?
Can you imagine if people here had to, I know we're paying it through our taxes for this $1 billion giant that is the ABC. But if we actually had to pay $350 a year.
I wish we did have the option to pay a license, because then I'm sure a lot of Australians would simply refuse to.